Hi, this is Pastor Jeff, and I'm here with Donna Tuley. Donna Tuley is one of our members. Her and Don have been a member at Pontiac Bible Church for
42 years.
42 years. So they have two boys, Josh and Mike, and they have a grandson named Camden. So I know she's very proud.
And a wonderful daughter-in-law named Kristen.
And a wonderful daughter-in-law named Kristen as well. So you have a very interesting story to go with our topic today. Raised in a Christian home, correct?
Yes.
But became part of the Mormon church.
Yes.
Tell us about how that happened.
Well, I was brought up in a Christian home. I have godly parents, but I don't think I paid attention well enough in church to learn how to walk with God as I should have. I was rebellious. So I didn't have the tools to deal with the situation that came up. My husband and I were divorced, and I was lonely, so someone lined me up with a blind date with a nice young Mormon fellow, and I started going out with him, and he took me to the Mormon church, and then consequently set me up with the Mormon missionaries, and they came to my apartment and started telling me about the Mormon way of life and what it meant to be a Mormon, and it all sounded sort of pleasant, and I was enjoying the attention from these nice people and listened to what they had to say.
So you were at a pretty low point in your life.
Yes.
You were lonely, and they provided comfort for you and community. Was there ever a time when you kind of cocked your head and thought, okay, I may not know much, but that doesn't sound right?
Yes. I would hear things that would make me wonder, but I would push it aside in favor of the pleasantries of being with these nice people.
Okay.
So, and one time in a church service, I remember singing along with them and singing about Mother God. And that was a big one. I thought, wait a minute, that doesn't sound right.
It doesn't sound right.
But again, I would just push that aside and keep going.
It's like Pastor Brian talked last week about the spring that the atheist has to hold down. It sounds like you were doing the same thing. It's like you were having to try to push it down, but you were pushing it down because you just didn't want to think about what was going on in your life.
Right.
It was easier just to have fun with your new friends.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, your family had a different perspective on your fun.
Yes.
What did they think of your inclusion in the Mormon friends?
Well, as this went along, I actually became a member of the Mormon church. I was baptized and went to some classes, and some holiday came up, and I went to see my parents and tried to convince them that my being a Mormon was all right. That was a good thing to do. And if you knew my parents, it's hysterical, because my mom got together an army of people to pray and tried to convince me that I was walking down the wrong path. Over this whole weekend, we looked at a lot of scriptures, and I argued back the things that I'd heard the Mormons say, until finally, I don't remember what scripture it was, but one of them opened my eyes. And I saw the truth, that this was not the truth. And I just started to weep, and it was as though scales fell from my eyes. It was almost a physical, tangible thing that happened. And I then knew that I was not following the right way.
Okay. And then you went back to your Mormon friends and said, had an interesting weekend, and they said?
They tried to convince me a little bit that I was mistaken, but then they had an excommunication, and I was excommunicated from the Mormon church.
From the Mormon church. So you heard that hymn about Mother God, but there were some other things that you heard as well that you kind of thought, what?
Yes. That Jesus and Lucifer, Satan, were brothers, that God had a wife, that God had intercourse with Mary to conceive Jesus, quite a few other things that at the time I brushed aside, but in my heart I knew that that was not the truth.
And so once that scripture your mom used came crashing in on you, all that other stuff probably did too.
Yes.
And you kind of, the whole thing, you were like, what am I thinking?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I knew I was mistaken.
Okay. So what advice would you give people about, perhaps they're even investigating Mormonism, or they have a family who's a Mormon, or, what advice would you give people about that?
Well, Pastor Brian mentioned in a recent sermon that it's said that people who want to figure out counterfeit money study the real thing. And that's the advice I would give, that you study the real scripture, the scripture that we know as the Bible.
Right.
And that way you can recognize when someone tells you something that isn't there. You'll see the truth. And also seek out your pastors, your youth leaders. There's a lot of good books. Just do some investigating on your own. Don't just take in what someone tells you.
You said that the Mormons were very nice.
Oh, they were.
Very sweet, and something about family that you said I thought was interesting.
Oh, yes. The thing that attracted me was their kindness. When they would have a prayer meeting, they would get in a circle on the floor and hold hands and pray their hearts out. And they were so sincere, and they had goodness. They would follow conservation efforts, or just how to work hard, how to do life well, and family was very important in their way of life. After my mom got through to me that weekend, she took me to see a counselor, an expert in these things, and the thing that bothered me was their sincerity. They were so sincere when they prayed, and I said, how could that be? They're praying to God. And he said, no, they are not praying to the same God. So.
And that was important to you. That helped you distinguish.
Yes.
Because you can be sincere, but you can be sincerely wrong.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. And so let's just do Paul Harvey, the rest of the story. That young man that you were divorced from.
Yes.
Was Don.
Yes.
And you remarried Don.
Yes, I did.
And you guys have been married for how long?
We don't count from those years. We had been married 6 years and we're divorced about 2.
Okay.
So we celebrate the real wedding date. So that would be 40 years.
40 years.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. Well, I thank you for doing this.
Mm-hmm.
I thank you for being willing to do this. And we're going to turn it back over to Brian.